Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our astrological festival. Today, we are very happy and honored to have Miss Deborah Houlding with us. She will talk to us about all things traditional astrology and specifically also horary astrology. She has been awarded from astrological institutes all over the world, and she also has authored a very famous book called The Houses, Temples of the Sky. Welcome, Deborah, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure, so thank you for inviting me.
Well, firstly, I'd like to ask, what is it that you specialize in astrology? What do you mostly practice nowadays?
Horary astrology is the practice that I tend to do for clients. I'm starting to consider myself as a semi-retired astrologer that wants to get more retired than as soon as possible, but there's so much to do and life is very busy. Uh, so I don't have as many clients now as I used to because I do a lot of teaching and I tend to specialize in horary. My I have a particular interest in horary astrology, but also electional astrology. I think that electional astrology is so underrated in terms of its philosophical richness. The idea that we can choose moments to act, but do those moments choose us? And very often you're just helping people to find the right moment that would have found them anyway. But I find that fascinating and very practical. And of course, the knowledge of horary really feeds electional astrology. So I think that I'm probably best known as a practitioner for those two approaches, but it comes out of an appreciation for all branches of astrology. I mean, I'm always interested in mundane astrology, so I've always got my eye. I write the Skyscript newsletter, so I'm very aware of the mundane cycles. And the thing that really persuades me about astrology is and over again how I see the reconfigurations of astrological patterns that re-emerge at times of significance. So in natal astrology as well, I find that really fascinating, the way that natal patterns can point us to dramatic moments in the life. So I'm very fascinated by that, but I tend not to be somebody that's out there offering a natal astrology service. I love it from a distance. I love to write about it, but I don't want to spend my time working with clients that want me to talk about them because I'm a little bit, I like to choose what's of interest to me. And I think that horary is very interesting in that it's more digestible lumps that I can get really involved in somebody else's life. So yeah, I guess I'm a bit everywhere, but generally known for being horary astrologer, I guess.
Well, thank you for that. So could you tell us what horary astrology is about? What is it that it focuses on?
Yeah, so horary astrology, I mean, the word it literally means of the moment, or something of a moment in time. And the horary chart is specifically to answer a concern about one particular issue. That's one of the reasons that I like it, because when I was younger and I was doing a more active astrological practice with clients who would come and see me with wanting an astrology reading, they would think that they came for to have the birth chart analysed, but nearly always it would end up that they've got one particular issue on their mind at that time that they wanted the astrological reading. And horary gets straight to that. So, very often I would have people come for a general astrological reading and it would end up being a horary because they didn't want to know about themselves. They knew about themselves, but they had an issue of concern. So a horary chart is drawn for the moment that a particular dilemma becomes recognized and of enough concern that somebody is ready to say that they need advice and guidance on it. And then the chart is just drawn like an event chart with particular, there's a very rich system to be learned about how to interpret that chart effectively. But in the process of that, the symbolism of astrology gets very rich, very colourful, and there's so much you can see in a horary chart. So yeah, I love it because it gets straight to the crux of the issue on the person's mind, and it gives them guidance on that issue. And it's, it's pretty rapid, basically. It gets straight to it. And so you can really, within just a few minutes that you spend on that consultation, you can deal with some pretty big issues that open up a lot of blockages and problems that the client was facing.
Right. Well, that sounds very interesting.
Mm.
I was able to see while browsing, through a little bit of your work, that you edited a new version of the Christian Astrology by William Lilly. Could you tell us how you came about doing that?
Well, that was actually very old work. Back in the 1990s, I used to run a magazine called the Traditional Astrologer. I mean, I haven't made mention of the fact that for me, I've always had a fascination with astrology, which is focused on its history and tradition as well. I love the idea of exploring where symbolism came from and how symbolism evolved. So in 1993, I created a magazine called The Traditional Astrology, which was, covering articles all about the history and tradition of astrology. And this was at the time when there wasn't much interest in traditional astrology. It was before the days of Project Hindsight, for example, and people like me were considered quite weird within the astrological community. Um, but at the same time, I created a company called the Seller Publications, and that was to reprint and to make available a lot of historical texts that were not available at that time. So it reprinted mostly as facsimile replications of original works of people like Dario, Ibn Ezra. There was a whole list of, John Gadbury's work, William Lilly's work. And I think it was in 1997 that I obtained the rights. I mean, a seller also made the Dorotheus text available when that had gone out of print. So, it did a lot of interesting texts, and I got the rights from the Bodleian Museum to reproduce the work of William Lilly, but only volumes 1 and 2. Because at that time, in order to do this, I had to write to them and get their permission and get a microfilm from them. So it was retyped back then, and it was published, I think, in 1997 or thereabouts. But then within a couple of years of that, I discovered I got a brain tumor. So I was doing an awful lot of work at that time. I was publishing a magazine. I had a website on the web. I was, got the book publishing company, and I was also lecturing all over the world for teaching horary, because at that stage, not many people were teaching horary or making it accessible. So it was when I was over in Australia giving a horary seminar that I was at. It was something I had like a funny turn, and the woman that I was with, which was an astrologer called Anne Fryer, dragged me to the doctors against my, like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm sure I just need a cup of tea. And she was very insistent, and I was very fortunate because the doctor there, knowing that I had, top whack medical insurance for my flight, managed to get me instant, very excellent attention, and they discovered that I got a brain tumor. So when I came back, I had to drop out of astrology for a number of years. I didn't think I'd ever be coming back into it, to be honest. I ended the magazine. I passed on the book company to another astrologer who was going to continue it, but he didn't actually. He got caught up in other things, so that just kind of folded, and then everything just sank. For years afterwards, I came back into astrology around 2003. So it was about maybe 4 years later, I started to come back, not meaning to, but I just got dragged into things. And I was seeing a lot of talk on the internet about people were saying that that edition of Christian astrology was the best one because I had annotated it with explanations of what he was doing and what he was talking about, and a lot of complaints that nobody could get a copy no matter what they did, and some copies were available but they were hundreds of pounds. And I was so frustrated because I only had one copy. I had lost all my electronic files myself, and so I hadn't got the copy, and I got this one copy which I'll show you here, which I'd been using, and it was like, it's all like coffee stained, and So I couldn't reproduce it even. I scribbled all over it. And then a year or two ago, I went into my summer house and I found this folder and realized that at the time that I had done the work, as each page was printed, I printed a page off and put it in a plastic folder. And so I discovered something I'd forgotten about, which was an absolutely pristine copy of the hard copy, not an electronic copy, but I got a pristine hard copy. And I was going up to my 60th birthday and I thought, I'd love to get this back out there. So I'll pay to have it scanned and I'll just put it there on the internet, and whatever it costs, it'll be my 60th birthday present to myself. So I paid for a company to scan it and they rebound it, and I put it up on Skyscript. And one or two people said, could you not make this a hard copy as well? So, I thought, I don't know how to do that, but I'll find out. And I got Amazon to make it available by print if people want it by print. And yeah, it's been really successful. I mean, I thought I'd be spending a lot of my own money to make it available for free, but the upshot was, because people could get it for free, they realized they wanted a copy on their desk. So it's actually been, something that turned out to be I'm very grateful that I found that copy and got it back out there. So yeah, that was a tick for me.
Right. That is quite the story. Well, one of your many creations is also a school, the School of Traditional Astrology. Can you tell us what inspired you to create it, and what do you hope to do with it? The
Okay,
purpose.
but just to say, it is generally known as the STA, School of Traditional Astrology. And yeah, I originated it, but I don't want people to think that it is my school, particularly because it's getting more and more now that other people are collaborating and have its future in their hands. But as I mentioned, in the 1990s, I was very fortunate in being invited to go over to Australia for the first time to give a course on horary. So I had to put something together at that time because I just took over a load of charts of my own experience to talk about them and explain them. It was like a 1 week residential intensive. It went very well, so I was asked back again many times in Australia. So each time I went over, I would ask for feedback, and some people would say it would be great if we could have copies of the charts. So the next time, I delivered, I gave them all printed handouts of the charts. Another time somebody said, it'll be great to have some bullet point notes for everything you've covered. So I started to put bullet points, and in response to feedback, I had started to, develop this as something that became richer and richer every time I delivered it and I shaped it. Um, and that was just really, that was in 1996 that I started to, deliver this course. But then as I dropped out of astrology, that closed as well. But then I came back and I delivered it a few times, and really beautiful places. I had some wonderful experience of meeting fantastic astrologers in weird, wonderful, exclusive resorts in different places and spending the week with them. But then it became clear that, there was a prospect for delivering it online for people who could not make the intensive. Now, originally, I did not want to get involved in online delivery because for me, it was very much a part of, I want to be present with people that I'm teaching. I want them a shared intimacy. I don't want it overexposed. But I had a few colleagues who said, could we develop it as an online course? And I was kind of, well, okay, as long as you don't bother me. Get on and do something with it, because I want to retire anyway, so I don't care.
Right.
And there was another time around 2016, when I found out I got another tumor. I got a parathyroid tumor. So it was almost like, do what you like with it. Don't bother me. I'm retiring again. Um, so anyway, they did this, but then when I started to see what they'd done, I hope they won't watch this interview, I wasn't terribly impressed. So I said, yeah, it's a good start, but I think if we're doing this, I think it has to be a bit better than this. So I took the material and I worked for a year or two on really polishing up, but with the aid of my, my collaborative assistants, and always knowing that they could help the load of delivering it. So the horary course turned into something, a new form of delivery, which I'm very proud of, because I really do think it's a wonderful course that puts every astrologer on the right track for reading charts well. In the process of that, Lee Lehman was the first to make a suggestion that she was doing a course on traditional medical astrology, which marred very well and really needed the students to have the grounding that the horary course offered. So she was saying, can I be a part of this? And we collaborated with Lee, and it started to introduce a medical astrology course. Wade Caves, who's been a wonderful tutor all round, and quite frankly, I couldn't have done half the things I've done if it hadn't been for Wade being, a part of this. He's recently, put in an astronomy for astrologers course, so that astrologers can be more understanding of the cycles. Nina Griffin is doing a electional course on that specializes on like magical talismans and different things. So the idea of the STA, which is the School of Traditional Astrology, is that we find a stream in doing the things that other schools aren't necessarily focusing on, with a target on traditional practical demonstration of traditional techniques and understanding their philosophy. So yeah, I mean, I'm very, very proud of the STA, and I think it will. My concern is to make sure it's set up so everything's got a future without me being present, and it's certainly going in a lovely direction.
Well, I'm sure it will be a wonderful experience for any inspiring astrologers. So you've mentioned a few times having, I don't know if this is the right term, but a bit of a troubled relationship with your astrological practice. You may be retired from time to time. I would love to know, how do you think that practicing astrology has changed you or shaped you as a person?
Oh, it defines me. It defines me. I think that, I think it was Mary, one of the queens, that said, if you cut open my heart, you will find Kali on my heart. And I think if you cut me open, there's just astrology inside it. It's like my entire life has been about my journey with astrology. And I think that my issue has never been with astrology. I've had a couple of occasions in my life where two serious health issues were discovered. And I have to say that without astrology, one of those would definitely have been missed. And I feel that astrology has already saved my life, on more than one occasion. But there has been the kind of, I'm somebody with Jupiter on the midheaven in Pisces, and it's a blessing and a curse because I always got so much that I'm fascinated by, and want to do, so many things that I actually think that I am the luckiest woman in the world, because I spend my time teaching a subject I truly love, which I actually think is the most fascinating subject in the world. I just think there is no subject that could touch the fascination of Horus. So, like, how amazing is that? And there's so much that I want to do with astrology. So I overextend myself constantly. And I never know my limits until I've gone through them. And then my body will see, like, oh, you're not immortal. And if I can't do what I want to do, I have to not do it at all. I just don't know how to, it's all or nothing. So if I'm not fully engaged in something, then I'm like, I think I've done what I've got to do there. So, but both times that I thought that I was retired, it was a case of, I've done what I needed to do. Now I should spend my life, decorating the house. I'm going to pick the roses in the gardens. Yeah, but seriously, Anna, I'm 62 now, and I remember Rob Hand getting an award at one of the UAC, and when he was 60, and he was saying, please don't, he got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was saying, but I want you to realise that this is just the start for me. Well, when I was 60, I wanted to say, I want everybody to realise this is the start of the end for me, because I seriously do want to have some years of my life when I wander around the garden, deadheading the roses and, cooking, and I want to have time. But yeah, I don't know.
Oh,
It's not astrology, it's just the circumstances.
right.
And if I may quickly add, there are times, and I think all astrologers have this, when we do need to step back, something needs to change in either the way that we're practicing, or we need to sometimes stop and step back. One of the times that the first time, there's always something else. The actual illnesses were always a handy excuse for something else that made me think, oh, I'm glad I've got that tumor, because now I can tell everybody I've got to stop because of the tumor. But actually, there was more behind it. And at one stage, it was when I was working very actively as a horary astrologer. And, when you work with horary, your work is for people with problems. Nobody, they come to you because they've got a problem. So you are in the business of dealing with other people's problems. And there have been times when that has become a bit too intense for me, because I had problems of my own that were not getting resolved at the time that I was so focally committed on sorting everybody else's problems out, when I should have been dealing with my own problems. So there's been times when I've had to step back, because the subject has become too intense. And when I do that, I think, I don't think I'll be going back. I'll keep it as a hobby. But when I do come back, I come back wiser, and I come back with that more balance, more aware of the pitfalls that I just fell into. There's also been times when the community involvement can be too much. For one reason or other, maybe you get involved in a committee, or you get too involved in social media, and it's suddenly like, I came into this subject because it's so spiritually rich, it's so philosophical, it's something I love to do for my own soul. And here I am arguing with people over petty points. This is not what it was about. Isn't it about healing and beauty? So sometimes you have to step back for that. So I don't think it's a bad thing for anybody to recognize that every now and again we need to step back. We need to let the field go fallow for a while, so that when it grows again, it grows a little stronger. So I guess there's part of that.
Right, definitely. It seems like a nice message,
If I can say that people must be fed up, because I say this a lot about my only ambition is to retire. People will be getting fed up of hearing me say that, because I probably never will. Because Anna, when I retire, I will continue to do exactly what I am doing. I want to retire so that I can do what I do, but just at a different pace, without the sense of the deadlines and the commitments. If I had time available, I will continue. I will use that time to do exactly what I'm doing, which is work on astrological texts, explore the history of astrology, because it's my thrill, it's my passion. I'm never going to stop doing that.
Right. You just maybe want it to be a little bit more private, from this point on. Right.
Yes, and the release of the material will be slow, and when I'm ready, rather than thinking I should have had that out already, or I'm already behind deadline with this, and so much going on. So there's just too much going on for me.
Yeah. Sometimes it can get a bit hectic. But you mentioned a few times also leaving a legacy and ensuring that the work you've done with colleagues can be
Mm,
passed on. So my question is, how do you think the future of astrology will look like? And especially, horary astrology. Has
mhm.
it become more popular in the latest years?
It has become popular. It must have become more popular. I mean, I've personally taught well over 1,000 astrologers to a very sincere level with horary astrology. So there's no way that it's not going to be more popular. But I'm not concerned. Here's my concern about this. I think astrology and the next generation of astrologers are going to have a problem in finding the right balance, because I'm very involved in presentation of astrology on the web with the Skyscript website, and yet I'm also very aware that this is a subject that can't be overexposed, and we can't make it seem too easy, too available, and too accessible. I'm not somebody that believes that everybody should be trained in astrology, for example. I don't go along with the argument that it's taught at schools, or no more than the subject of understanding electricity. It's good for everybody to have some knowledge of that and to know how to wire a plug. But if you need an electricity service, let's get a trained electrician in to do it. And I feel very much that the problem with the popularization of astrology and topics like horary through easy access to certain principles on the internet is it leaves a lot of half-trained astrologers who are capable of doing more harm than good. They start charts not knowing how to complete them. They get involved in, they proactively go looking for questions to answer rather than be receptive, fully trained and receptive to the questions that come to them. And I think that that's a bit of a worry, that we've got to be careful as a community to make it clear that while it's great that there's more people showing an interest in astrology, there is a real need for astrologists to be truly, properly trained in a subject that is very complex, philosophically rich, and it's not something that you can learn easily and instantly. So I'm when I talk about my concern for things going forward, it's very much with the sense of things have got to be set up right. I don't know the answer. Maybe it's only enough that I can see the problem. Um, and maybe that's as far as my input goes, that I can see a need. So one of the things that I'm very concerned with at the moment, Anna, is this Skyscript site that I do, which I had to make a decision. It was getting very old, and it was like, do I get rid of Skyscript or do I invest in it? It was started in 2003 as a website to make it easier for astrologers to find resources and connect with each other. But the web has changed so much in 20 years, and we've now got social media, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter. Do people want an old-fashioned website? So I had to really make a decision about putting a lot of time and energy into working with that, letting it go. And I took the decision that I'm going to spend the rest of the time that I got available to put that into a state that it can continue into the future as an old-fashioned website that is not commercialized, that is not about popularizing the subject, that doesn't need to make a big profit it doesn't need a lot of people to come to it. It's going to be set up in a way that its costs are minimal, and it's for people that are truly, genuinely interested without worry about, is it popular? And that's one of the ways that I see my remaining time being invested in things that I want to make a difference in the future. If it's only just something like that cares about the links to other people, to other astrologers, that I think is where I'm trying to do my bit to help. I think everybody's got to do what they can on that issue.
Right, certainly. So, you feel a bit concerned about how social media could influence, popular knowledge of astrology, because I'm on social media a lot and I personally see it more and more, but it's on a very meme-like, superficial level. And you want to make sure that it doesn't just stop at that there are people who train properly and are able, to pass.
Yeah, I mean, astrology has always had its popularizers, and that's always been welcome and important. I mean, in historical society, the whole of society knew about astrology, and it was integrated into their art, into their comedy. It was like, so society should know about astrology, and but it's a balance. Everything's a double-edged sword. And there's also, I know, a lot of astrologers that are very sincerely trained, and then they make a character for themselves on social media, and then they find themselves caught up into a trap where that character has to keep delivering content in order to keep, the stream fresh or to get the attention. And before too long, they've done what I've done in the past, which is fallen out of love with the subject that they were in love with, because it's become entrapped with all these trappings of having to perform, having to, get attention, having to get likes. And so, I've seen and witnessed many very, very excellent astrologers that have done good things on social media, but then they've had to leave the social media. Perhaps they leave the whole branding away and they want to go back to just being an astrologer in their own name without the social media trappings, just the quiet processing. So I don't know the answer, as I said, Anne. It may be enough that I'm just aware that I'm stupid enough not to know the answer, but that it's complicated and it's the issue that the next generation has to deal with. How to keep interest in astrology vivid and respected without over popularizing it to the level of farce. Now, in my generation, when I was younger, we didn't have this because the fight that we had was to not have astrology ridiculed. Like where I live in Britain, like for example, around the early 2000, 2011, it was, you know, the problem was people wouldn't take it seriously, or they would think that if you were into astrology that you were stupid, or, you know, it was all superstition and ridicule and it was woo-woo. Now, because of the social media influence and the power of the internet, that very much seems to have moved out of focus now. And there is a recognition that society is interested in this subject. Whatever, you know, scientists or anybody else might say, the people love it, are interested in it, and want to know about it. So it's a different battle now because, to some extent, now we've got to change this to from saying, you know, it's not ridiculous, to now saying, you do know some parts of this are ridiculous. You know, we don't want to, and I don't know the answer, but you know, I do know that things swing around about and go from one extreme in one generation, and then they sort themselves out in the next generation. So I'm sure it'll be pretty much like, I don't worry about the future of astrology. Astrology has been around for 4,000 years. You know, nothing that culture does is going to take this subject down. But the astrologers that get involved in it will each have their own dramas, their own points of pain. And, you know, we're a community, so we should, I think it behooves every generation to make sure they don't leave a total cock up for the one that follows.
Right. So I've got one last question for you. What message would you give to an astrologer who is now starting to learn and truly um, expand their knowledge on the subject? What would you tell them, or any tips that you would give?
I don't, for the tips, first of all, I think that when somebody really gets into astrology, they don't need any advice from me. Something grabs them in, you know, in their stomach and enlivens their soul, and they will get enraptured by the excitement that as they explore this subject, it becomes richer and richer. So I do believe, you know, for all I was saying that we need seriously trained astrologers, I also believe in the power and the absolute magic that comes with somebody that is newly opened up to astrology, when their heart is flooded with the excitement, and you know they dream it, they sleep it, and they're so enraptured that those people are so open that, you know, it's amazing what they can do, but they don't realize that, and I'm speaking from my own experience, of course, that for all that passion and flood of energy, you see, I think, Anna, that when I was young and a new astrologer, I was as good an astrologer then as I am now, 30, 40 years later. In the sense that when I looked at a chart, I knew what the chart was speaking to me. I was such a strong connection to this, you know, like, don't tell me what this chart means, I know what this chart means. But what I hadn't done is I hadn't understood what comes with seeing that kind of information. So I guess this goes back to what we've already talked about, that there is a journey of not just being able to see things in the chart, but how to deliver that, how to hold your own space, how to know what to give, what to retain, how to get over the ego issue, because we all start off wanting to be the astrologer that can go around solving the world's mysteries and finding all the dead bodies, and, you know, like they should be making a drama series about me as an astrologer. You know, I look at a chart and then I go and solve the mystery. You know, there's ego battles to be dealt with. There's, when you open up on that level, you're not just opening up to, seeing more astrologically, but you're also feeling the resentment of the people around you that you've got to deal with that. So there's a whole journey of training as an astrologer, which I think many astrology schools and courses don't factor in, that this will change you and it will change your life. And you can't get involved in a spiritually rich subject like this without it really requiring a spiritual journey for you.
Right. Well,
Sorry,
I,
I apologize for I believe that's my brother, who's always had a very bad sense of timing.
that's all right. Well, I can only thank you again so very much for joining us and giving us a little bit of your time.
Sorry, let me just silence my brother.
All right.
Go away, Robert. There we go.
Right.
So,
I would say thank you again very much for giving us this half hour with you, and I hope that you will have a happy and serene retirement.
never gonna happen.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, been delightful to talk to you, Anna. Thank you for sharing an interest in my thoughts.